All right, good morning, Mosaic Church. We're on our way to the warehouse. It's gonna be a great day. Come join us, vlog style today. All right, we made it. Let's do this. So today we're talking about parenting, and I remember the very first time I became a parent. It was in April 25th, 2015. Our son Zeke was born. And I remember for the very first time feeling this unconditional love for Zeke. And I think it made me feel and understand really how God loves me with this unconditional love. But I also remember being fully unprepared and trying to get to read as much as I could to actually be a good parent, but realizing just because I was a kid at one point, I really didn't know how to raise a kid. And just because I had parents really didn't mean that I knew how to be a parent. I'll help you if you need it. I'll help you. Okay, here you go. Let me help him. Turn hard turn. Keep going. Okay, so I want to introduce you guys to someone. His name is Isaac. He's our bass player here at Mosaic. Isaac, say hello.
Hi, Mosaic. Good morning.
It's gonna be a good day at church today.
Yes.
He's an amazing bass player. Check him out. All right. The church is actually kind of noisy at this time. Let's go find some place quiet to talk. All right, I think I found a place. This looks good. Let's hang out here. All right, so what does it take to be a good parent? Well, I have a friend who's a student pastor, and obviously they get to hang out with a lot of kids and parents. And you get to see the good kids and maybe the not so good kids, the good parents and the maybe not as good parents. And you begin to see some trends. And here's 5 things that he saw in the really great parents. The first one's this, is that the really good parents, they had fewer rules. It's like they were able to get their kids to obey them without having a set of list of things not to do. And it was always the kids that were not so good that were always breaking the rules. Number 2 is that they were not afraid. They were not afraid of their children. They were not afraid of disappointing them. They were not afraid of the kids' rejection. They were not afraid of disciplining their children. Number 3, they actually discovered their kids' gifts and talents and encourage that. They didn't force them to do the things that maybe what they were good at as parents whenever they were young children. I know that's a temptation for me because I played a lot of soccer growing up and I was pretty decent at it. And so one of my dreams was to always be my kid's soccer coach. And so my son Zeke's in soccer classes now. And whenever he's playing, it takes everything in me not to go down there and just like force him to do what I think is best. And so I see the temptation in that. And I want to find Zeke's skills and talents, and I want to encourage him in that. Number 4 is they prioritized relationship over experience. They didn't feel this temptation to put their kids into every single little thing, and they prioritized experiences that they could do together as a family rather than everyone separate in their own direction. And number 5, probably the most influential, but probably the most controversial as well, is that they had healthy marriages. They had healthy marriages, not perfect marriages, but healthy marriages. And look, I get it. For some of you here today, you feel discouraged or you see that as bad news because that's just not an option for you. But you see, if we take away that option and we talk about parenting and we just don't include healthy marriages, you see, what we do is we take away the ideal situation for a child. Where a mother and a father and kids, they all live under one roof. If we take away that as an option, if we don't point someone towards ideal, if we don't point our kids towards ideal, you see, we kind of steal something from them. We kind of rob something from them. We rob the potential of it being their future as well, the ideal situation. So even though it's tough and even though it's real, we still need to point to ideal as well. We need to live in this tension of real versus ideal. All right, you see, the Bible is full of stories of actually bad parenting. If you look at just the first, Adam and Eve, they brought sin into the world. And then they were fighting with each other, arguing who was to blame. They had a couple kids, and what happened to their kids? Well, one of their kids killed the other kid. In fact, that actually makes our problems today actually tame compared to what they were doing in the Old Testament. But you see, the New Testament brought a different idea. It brought the idea of what could be and what should be, what is ideal. And again, it's our job as parents to be able to point our kids towards ideal, to what should be and what could be. Now, when it comes to living and teaching in this kind of messy middle between real versus ideal, Jesus was the master of doing it. Let's go talk about that. You see, the gospel doesn't begin with once upon a time this world where everything was perfect and everybody did everything right. It doesn't begin that way. It begins like this: that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. You see, God assumed that there was going to be sin in this world, that we were going to screw it up, and not everything was going to be perfect. It also starts with, for God to love the world. And what world is it? Not this Garden of Eden where everything is perfect. It's this kind of screwed up world that we're currently in. God knew that it was going to be this way. You see, God knew that there's going to be this real versus ideal. Jesus, again, he's the master at doing this, of real versus ideal. And when I look at the scriptures, Jesus said this. He said, "You have heard it said, you should not commit adultery." And so, which I think the people that I was saying to, yeah, okay, yeah, we've heard that, Jesus. Then he said this, "But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." To which I think the people around him would have been like, "No, Jesus, we haven't heard that part. And we actually don't like you saying that. That kind of makes us feel bad. Could you stop saying that?" You see, Jesus was the master of pointing people towards ideal. Jesus gave people something to aspire to. And what did he do when people didn't live up to the standard, that high standard that he just gave? Well, he loved them. He actually condemned the condemners. He condemned the condemners, and then what did he do? Well, he died for the condemners. Instead of lowering the standard, Jesus turned up the grace. You know, he made every single man an adulterer, and then he paid the price for adultery. And then when some of the leaders of the time tried to catch him in what is marriage, he raised the standard of marriage so high that men could not wiggle their way out of their responsibility. It turned it up so high that, in fact, the disciples gathered around and talked about it and said, "Man, if that's what marriage really is, then maybe we just shouldn't get married." In other words, Jesus, look, you make this sound so permanent, so unrealistic. You know, people change, things happen, Jesus. And I think he would say, "Yeah, I know that. That's why I'm here." Which I think they might say, "So are you against divorce?" And Jesus would say, "Yes, absolutely." You see, divorce hurts people. And then, well, what are you going to do for the people that are divorced? And he said, "Well, I'm going to give my life for them. It's going to give my life for you." This is the tension. This is the beautiful tension of the gospel, of dealing with the reality and also pointing towards ideal. You see, Jesus never dumbed down the truth, but he never turned down the grace either. Jesus was all truth and all grace all of the time. Every once in a while, we need to be reminded of what could be and what should be. And when it comes to parenting, we need to point our kids towards the ideal. We still need to live in the reality, but if we take away the ideal, we steal something from our kids of what could be in the future. Our kids just need to see it to believe it. Here's a story of my friend Rick Jackson. Let me tell you about that. So Rick grew up in actually a pretty terrible situation. The family that he was with, or his family, was quite violent, and sometimes you might say it was quite dangerous for Rick to live there. So at the age of 13, he decided that he was going to run away. And so he ended up going and telling his uncle, and his uncle said, "Well, don't just go out into the streets. Actually, why don't you, there's government organizations that can help you and that will give you a place to live and give you some food to eat." And so his uncle dropped Rick off at the government facility, and Rick was placed into a children's home. But eventually, Rick was able to make it into a family, and he joined the Price family. And there at the Price family, for the very first time, he saw parents and kids sitting at the same table, and they were not arguing and screaming at each other. He saw a dad bring home a paycheck. He saw a father provide for the very first time. And this is what Rick said about all this. He said, "I just needed to see it, to aim for it. Once I saw it and experienced it, I knew what I wanted. Until then, I didn't even know that it existed." Looks like the band's rehearsing.
Okay, my click aqui was solo.
Oh, you have a new job.
Oh, that's right, yes. Highly favored. Highly favored.
Highly favored.
Highly favored. See, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And us as parents, I think it's our job to point towards the ideal, to point towards the future, to make plans for our children so that they can have a healthy relationship in the future, so that they can have plans around their finances, around their relationships, and around their spirituality. It's our job to make sure that we point them towards ideal. And if we take a healthy marriage off the plate, if we don't show them of what could be or should be, we end up robbing and stealing from our kids' future and from the future generations. So let's live in that messy middle. Real versus ideal. In the end, if we can live in that messy middle, we're going to make a difference in this world. So together, we can do it all.